Oh. We were worried a little bit this morning when I was told the projector isn't really working. It's hard to describe in words what you're going to see. We'll make a start in just about a couple of minutes so we don't miss anybody who's joining online. I'm going to go and get a drink of church coffee, so pray for me. But if you would like to get a drink as well, please do, and we'll get started right at 10:30, so we're a couple of minutes out. Good morning, everybody. Very glad, and I'm trusting that I'm going to wave at the camera, that good morning to everybody who's joining us online. There are some videos that I'm not going to, because of the AV IT gods, I'm going to try and show them at the end, but I know if I somehow switch out of this PowerPoint, I'll be punished in some way by it not working. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint. What you could expect this morning is I'm going to spend about 15 or so minutes walking through these lovely images of this extraordinary part of the world, and then I'm going to invite my friends here, my fellow travelers and pilgrims, up onto the stage. I'm going to ask them some questions so you can get a sense from them of what it was like for us to be there. But I'll begin with a greeting that is offered traditionally in the language Kiswahili at the beginning of a service, or actually when anybody gets up to say anything, Bwana Yesu asifiwe, which means praise Lord Jesus. And people sometimes would say Amina, which is, you can guess, Amen. I've got to say before I start all of this, I am still amazed. Sometimes I still wake up in the morning and say, how did they do that? That these church members, and I'm a professional Christian, if you can imagine that, but these folks are on their way to glory. And we sat in and worshipped in services that probably 80%, well, maybe that's very low, 90% plus was in Kiswahili, in a language that none of us really followed. And the typical service length is 3 hours long. And although Emmanuel, I don't think really wants us to know that we did worship in a service, extraordinary service, that was 6 hours long. That's not us being fanciful. It was really that long. 17 choirs performed. And a choir is, don't think Anglican English, think Anglican Tanzania, where there is movement and it's really dance and singing. The thing that sort of wake up scratching my head is, how on earth did these All Saints parishioners, they roll with it. One day we went to 10 churches. Which is the day we had 6 meals, 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch, 2 dinner. Everywhere you go, it was just extraordinary. So I want to give you a sense of that as we share about our partners. And that's going to stand over here, so I'm not blocking anybody's view of these pictures. And some of you won't know who the person is in the center. And in many ways, the person in the center is the person in the center of this presentation, Emmanuel Boata, who is the bishop of the Diocese of Western Tanganyika. We're going to talk a lot today about our partners there, and I'll share a little bit about some other partnerships that are emerging. But there he is in the midst of his people, and that doesn't stop. Day by day, that is how he spends his time in the midst of his people. These are, I'm going to skip by them because they are embedded videos. Ooh, it's going to do that. I wonder if it'll give me any sound. Ooh. Let me see if we can just enjoy this for a second. It did work. This is for the offering. This is how they do the offering. This is how they do their pledge campaign. The people in red are confirmands. People in white are the altar party. And you'll see it in other pictures. Notice the mother with the baby on her back. Yeah, eventually. And this priest in the foreground is an excellent dancer, and he's just itching to get in there. There's the bishop taking a video. Even he finds it remarkable. This is not for us, to be clear. They didn't dance for us. This is how they worship. There he goes. Can't stop himself. Loves it. Sorry, it's so jumpy. We'll be doing this next week at the 9 o'clock. The people in purple are one of the choirs. They're in one of the choirs. And it just goes back to as they were. All right, I'm going to not show the next one because it will be too long. It's a similar thing, but with a choir. But let me move on. So there he is, Emmanuel Boata, Bishop of Western Tanganyika. He must have said something funny about my soccer team. We have a long-standing rivalry between our two soccer teams. It's a 20-year friendship, not for me, but for All Saints. It's a friendship for me now, but for 20 years. Some of you will have been here when Emmanuel came as a student. You will have heard in recent years about his work as the Dean of the Theological College and how, and we'll share more about work that we've done in partnership with them. And the wonderful gift of the folks that came in our group is that many of them, most of the group had hosted Emmanuel in their homes, called him a friend, knew him as a friend. And I'm going to share more about Emmanuel and his leadership. He remains one of the most remarkable leaders I've known in the church. So it's part of our global community, the Anglican Communion. When I say Anglican, please ignore, I'm not being rude about them, but don't think of Our Lady of the Freeway and the church over there. Don't think of American Anglicans. That won't help anybody. Think of global Anglicans. We are part of a global church. We're a tiny part of a global church that is growing rapidly in East Africa, where we were, and actually, of course, across sub-Saharan Africa. So this is part of the community we're in, and it's a partnership. And we're very clear that this is a partnership in being the church. We don't see our relationship with Tanzania as a relationship to people who we are helping out. They're not the objects or subjects of our charity. These are partners in the church. And in many ways, if we want to scratch our heads and say, well, how might the church grow? We have some pretty good partners in that part of the world that could help us think about that question, because the church is growing rapidly there. So we have focused this partnership with Western Tanganyika on theological education. The woman there is one of the first deacons ordained in that diocese. Just a month before we got there, she actually will practice social work in Dar es Salaam, which is a good plane ride away on the east part of the country. We're in the far west of the country. And we have focused our support, our financial support of this partnership on women's education. It is not that we don't like men getting theological education. It's that the previous bishop said you can definitely have women at the theological college. This is before they could be ordained. It's just we haven't got any money for them. So you have to find the money. And he said, well, I know of a church. Actually, knew of more than one church. But we said, we'll do that. And it's been a remarkable thing. I with a son in college, I'm now keenly aware of the cost of college in the United States. It costs $800. We invest $800 in the life of a student per year, and it covers all that is needed for them. Transformational for the community that she comes from, her family, for all of the women who are already leaders in the church, now see women taking up that leadership role. It is a transformational era, and so that investment helps fuel the transformation they are leading. So we discovered this remarkable leader. We knew Emmanuel as a friend. I hadn't seen him in leadership, and I don't think we had seen him in leadership. The greatest gift I can offer, lesson that I got from him, that I think is a tremendous gift, and I'm going to be, notwithstanding my own family's news, rude about bishops in the United States, if I may, for a minute, that sometimes I think that the money that swirls around the Episcopal Church doesn't do us good. And sometimes the money that swirls around the episcopate and dioceses doesn't do us good, because we create this very curious sort of hierarchy, and we treat bishops strangely, and then they behave strangely. They kind of create this odd subculture within the church. I don't think it's healthy. The gift that Emmanuel has, that we saw him, including coming down one evening in his pajamas, didn't seem to bother him, to where we were staying and just sort of chatting with us. He was the same with everybody. He was the same with, I really mean that. Unless we're missing all the Kiswahili, and he said all these awful things, but all of his body language, all of his physical proximity, all the way that he was, it seemed to be the same wherever he went. And I cannot tell you how powerful that is in church leadership, and how rare that is in the episcopate. One of the things I loved about this morning was seeing our youth displace the clergy. And we have incorrectly treated the sanctuary as a place where clergy have special privileges. But it's actually the table of Christ, where only Christ is the head, the servant of all. And so he should be offering lessons to clergy across the Episcopal Church to help us live into that kind of ministry, because it means that his clergy, from very impoverished circumstances to those with more means, whatever their standing, whoever they are, can find their way to him, because he finds his way to them. It's incredible. We discovered a church, a diocese that's brimming with life. There you go, there's another baby there looking up thinking, how can I raise my hands? They're stuck in here. But the churches were just, it's hard to describe how brimming life. They have people on the in the doorway looking in, people on windowsills or the equivalent thereof. It is just bubbling up with life, and it's bubbling up with human life. It's so wonderful. Look at this. This is the 6-hour service, and he's drawn the people to come. That wasn't everybody that was there. As you can see, it keeps on going. We're in the background. You can't see us, thankfully, in the shade. But he's drawn some of the people forward. And that is an image. I love that image. It is an image of the church in sub-Saharan Africa. This is what the church looks like. You don't see stained glass window there. You actually don't see a building. There is a building, but we weren't in it. It was too small. And so they gathered the church however they could, and they are gathered there for hours, not just to be with their bishop, but to worship God and to be the church and have their children confirmed. So we discovered a church building itself around its people. I have sometimes wondered, I used to work with a missionary in India, and she said, we have so much, which she went back to Scotland, living in public housing. In her view, people around me have so much. And then she paused and looked at me, and it makes them miserable. And I'm not glamorizing poverty, but there is, I mean, I think the folks that will come up to the platform pretty soon, there is a joy there that was infectious, and sort of, and they just clearly love congregating. They do a lot of congregating, but it's just a wonderful way by which the strategy of growth in that diocese is to grow a church around its people, not around its buildings, not around its institutions, but around its people. And let's just say it's working. We caught a vision for economic development, and we're going to share more about that in due course. We're going to share about the farm that we're on right there. The farm's crops have failed because of poor rains. So we learned about how transformational your irrigation system, farming equipment like tractor, could allow that to become an economic engine for them to build their own economic power, which is exactly what churches, I believe, need, and that's just my belief, need all across the world, particularly in the global south, to have their own power to build their economic capacity. So that there's, of course, just so much potential that they have to be able to do that. We'll see in other places of these slide shots, you'll see a sewing machine. That's part of vocational training, computer skills, and so on. But there's a vision for economic development. Now, there it is, right there. And for human development, so the old theological college is now a vocational school. The theological college has moved to the outskirts of town. So in the center of the town, that sewing machine, as an example, people will be trained to be tailors and so on, seamstresses, using the sewing machine. And if they can actually have their own sewing machine, it's transformational for their chances of building economic power. But it costs, I think, I'm going to say $200 for a sewing machine, which is beyond many of the people. Now, I don't know where you spend $200 in a month, but it just makes us think about the capacity that they could have if they could build, again, their own infrastructure of capital. They're not short of the ideas. This is not a church that needs people from other countries to help them think. We have enough trouble with that ourselves here, helping us think. But they've got all the vision. It's just helping that grow. We discovered a vision for health. This is not a diocesan ministry, but this man there has been working with the diocese previously, particularly with refugees. We saw firsthand, not to make this political, but just simply to share, when USAID's funding got cut, one of the things I didn't realize, having had malaria myself, which is not a pleasant disease to have, that pregnant women are particularly vulnerable to malaria, and the mortality rate shoots up if you're pregnant and contract malaria. And so anti-malarial medication or malarial treatment is essential. And the short version is they're running out. Simply running out of medicine. Not that they can't, it just cannot get hold of it. That's true of multiple medications. We went to see his pharmacy, and all of us were shocked at how threadbare those store cupboards were. But they have a vision for health that's affordable. We were there when women were there, mothers were there with their babies. They're teeming with people. And we discovered a church that has a vision for raising up leaders in the church. Those are two of the priests. They continue to raise up leaders for the church because the church is growing so much. Something like 180 churches, parishes. Emmanuel will visit about 150 of them each year. Think about how many 3-hour services that is. He took us on the easy roads, we can tell you. Some of us are still recovering with our bones, with all of that. We discovered a church that welcomed us in. That was one of our 67 meals that we had during our time in churches. We could tell you the menu because it didn't change that much, but we were welcomed in. And I really want to raise up this group of people because Emmanuel said he never apologized for the facilities, rightly. Never said, I'm so sorry, the toilet really is literally a hole in the ground, which was the case in some places. It never did this. Maybe they complained amongst each other and they spared me, but I never heard one complaint about how these facilities were not somehow up to par. All Saints was so well represented. And we got a wonderful email back from Emmanuel saying, thank you for coming and fundamentally loving us, to sharing the love of this community with our communities, and I couldn't have hoped for a better thing. So I'm going to show you some images. I'm not going to talk about them too much because I want to invite the panel to come forward. So there's the classic meal. It repeats itself every place you go, and it was wonderful. Diocesan office, one of many churches. You see the people predominate there. You can see a larger church being built behind the smaller church. Worship is so vibrant. Look at that. That's their youth. Hundreds of youth were confirmed during our time there. That's not an exaggeration, because we went to one service that had over 100. It's hundreds of youth. I love that picture of a mother and child. There's Henry. I love that picture too. Being embraced. Again, we see just there's no nursery there. Children are welcome from birth. They're welcome here too, but we sort of, we kind of have an approach to childhood. Their approach to childhood is, if they're in the church and they can crawl or run, they have catchers at the door that will turn them around and send them running the other direction. This is one of my favorite images, just the sheer strength of her posture and hers. This is, I won't play this video because I'll get fired, but this is, I'm leading a dance, which is amazing. I think you were dancing behind me. Maybe I've got it on video. You were. That's us showing them. It's at the seminary. They've got a fair bit of land. That's Emmanuel amidst his people. Again, the vibrant worship life. After people are confirmed, the parents come or guardians come and put garlands around them and embrace them. It's beautiful. Heartfelt worship. I wonder if that gets any brighter. It does not make any difference. Okay. That's them lined up with their Bibles, with their names in it, to be confirmed. That's me preaching amongst the people. The guy translating wasn't quite sure where I was going as I went right to the door. I'm now on YouTube. Somebody filming me there. That was a fun service. So much singing. Singing such a core part of the ministry there. Macrina, that's her name, was one of the 3 women who made many meals for us. Wonderful human beings. Confirmands of all ages. I suspect those women are late teens, early 20s perhaps. They raised their Bibles in the air after they'd been confirmed. There's a whole talk that we need to figure out what Emmanuel used to say, but there was a moment where they'd all raised their Bibles in the air. So much singing and worship. And we would offer greetings. You can see Brooke, they would be asked to offer greetings. So important for us to greet the community, and there's people listening to our greetings. so that they could get a sense of who we are. Again, music and a life together. I love this picture too. It's blurred, but it doesn't matter because it's just such a beautiful sense of this joy that people had in us, people we hardly knew. And look at this chap. Beautiful picture. We're asked to do. We did a lot of praying. Don't say Episcopalians can't pray without a prayer book. We did a good job there. And I think they often would laugh when there were certain names that would make them laugh. Just our names. There's the bishop with a young man with learning difficulties, and again, the same with him as he would be with the Archbishop of Canterbury, would be my guess. Wonderful. Obviously, I'm very famous out in Tanzania now, but yes. That's us actually just on having taken pictures on the border of Burundi. And that's the bishop with his wife and oldest child in their home. That's us saying goodbye. That's us saying hello in the cathedral. Inside the cathedral. Emmanuel said something clearly that Ben is been interested in. Again, more greetings. And I'll ask if my panel could come forward now to the chairs. We'll turn this off, but I'm just going to share some images of them as they come. It's a wonderful life together that they have. There's Judd and Dirk. And here's our Lord. That may mean nothing to you, but that was the royal photographer for many years. Winston Wyman is the photographer for almost all of the pictures, and is a remarkable. I wanted people to know what a gift it was to have pictures because of him. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make the lights be a little bit warmer here, so you can. Let's see what this does. You never know. Sorry if this gets very bright. There you go. So I'm just going to offer a chance for them to offer any insights. And I'm going to ask you to share these. I'm going to be the Oprah or something like that. If you just share the microphones at either end. I'll start by asking, and then we'll hopefully have a little bit of time if you've got any additional questions to ask. What was most surprising about this trip? We did our best to have a sense of what we were going to do. And we did have an itinerary. I don't think any of us really believe what it would amount to. But were there things that stood out that were surprising to you? From the smallest things, for example, anything about the electricity and water supply that surprised you during that trip? But I'd love to hear. And if you just make sure if you speak, just put the microphone right up to your mouth. But anybody want to share about anything that was surprising?
I would like to say that when
I think it's on.
When we were going to all those 23 churches, every single time we arrived there were people singing and dancing and yelling, "Ave, Ave," which I think they were calling for the bishop.
Father, yeah.
And many times they had olive branches, that's what we think they were, waving them. And it kept reminding me of the pictures of Jesus coming in on Palm Sunday. It was truly amazing.
Wasn't there an occasion where on that day we saw 10 churches? One of us said, it was the same thing. People were singing and dancing, and somebody, do you think that's for us? Like it was the same every place. Because Emmanuel hadn't quite said there were 10 churches. He just said, well, one more. And then one more appeared. And then we turned the corner and we see all these people singing. Well, it probably isn't for anybody else, but here we go. Anything else that was surprising or just struck you?
I'm an architect, and it's hard for me to travel anywhere without looking at the architecture. I think to call these churches is a little bit of a misnomer. They're really houses of worship. Sometimes you've got the walls, sometimes you've got walls with a roof, sometimes you've got, they're in various degrees of completion, but it doesn't matter. They are just so enthusiastic and passionate about their religion, and it's just joy everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So several years ago at All Saints, I heard one of our absolutely outstanding preachers talk about agape love in her sermon, and that kept cropping up to me everywhere I went throughout this visit. It didn't matter if we were with Emmanuel and his relationship with us and his relationship with everybody in his diocese. It just didn't matter. Here was this agape love that was just radical hospitality. It was unconditional, and it was steadfast. And to see that everywhere, the joy in everybody's faces, the experience, the praying for us, we were the ones that received this agape love. And now that I'm back and I volunteer at Threads and I volunteer at Refugee Ministries, I have been asking myself, well, what now? What difference does that trip make? Why should we continue with a relationship in another continent when we have a need here that is, it's so great? But I think about all of us at All Saints, and I think All Saints is a church of all. And I think we are not an either-or church, that we are an and-both church. And as an and-both church, that means that we are also an agape church.
That's good. I love that.
I don't know if this was a surprise, but I want to echo the joy and exuberance. You saw this in the pictures. That's what we experienced every day, all day long. And that first video that Simon showed, you probably thought that went on for a few minutes. Well, that went on for 6 hours, literally 6 hours, and it was incredible. So I think it wasn't really a surprise, but it was a real joy to be with them. The exuberance is incredible. We have a lot to learn from the people we met and from this experience. We talked a lot during the time that we were there, how much we wanted to learn to dance for y'all today. We did not manage that, but we really wanted to be able to do that because we saw it every day, all day long. But I also thought about how we might incorporate some of the things we experience in our own worship. For example, the offering. You saw that part. I would love it if someday we all danced our way up and put our offering in the basket like they do. What I would really love is if when the bishop comes to visit, we're all outside waving branches when he drives up, or she. That was really special. There were a lot of surprises. I think after 2 or 3 meals, we realized that we were going to have the same meal every meal. And I guess that was a surprise, but when you showed the picture, I thought, oh, there it is, there's our food. The people took such great care of us, and they were so generous. And so one of the things I want to say is the generosity, not just of spirit, but everywhere they went, they would give us things, and we were like, oh my goodness, they don't need to be giving us presents. And some of us are wearing our clothes. On our last night there's a seamstress and a tailor in the bishop's compound, and on the last night they gave each one of us a little brown wrapped up package, and we opened them up, and they had made clothes for every one of us. We all actually have matching outfits, but and that was so special. That, you go to a place where there's so little, but they give so much in terms of themselves, their love, their joy, their generosity, and their spirit, and it will live with us forever. And I hope we can find some ways to incorporate that spirit here. I think we feel this way. We could act it out a little bit more exuberantly, like they do.
I'm curious about, today was was a youth Sunday. It was a service where the youth were leading. What did you notice about the place of children and youth in the church? Just what struck you when we walk in and there's all those sort of church worship services we've been at, and then remember that last Sunday at the cathedral was also a youth Sunday service there. Anybody share, just to help describe that for folks, of how children and youth are part of that diocese? And just hold that microphone right to your chin, because it'll be hard to hear.
I think Simon already mentioned that the children in the service, oftentimes they'd end up like at our feet as we were sitting up by the altar, and they would sort of come as close as they could get to where the bishop was, and they'd end up or I think Sue had them behind her. They were in the window, and they would watch us. I don't think they had seen that many white people, so they would just look at us. Lynn had painted her toenails, and they were just blue, and they were looking at her toenails. But yeah, it just having the children there and little bitty kids. If you're sitting at the front, you're looking down the aisle, the door's open, you can bright sunlight outside, and the kids, the silhouetted against the bright sunlight as they sort of were dancing down the aisle, I mean, to no music, to their own music. And the joy and spirit of everybody, but the children who came and sat in the windows to watch what was going on was amazing.
The kids don't go to nursery there. They go to the worship service with the parents. Often the mother is either holding the baby or has the baby on her back. And even on some of those choir dances, you may have seen a mother with a baby on her back doing the dance. So the kids are out there. And several choirs we saw had children at the very front who were like the mascots or something of the choir. And they were doing the dance too. So they start doing that as soon as they're born. It's an amazing thing. They lead, there are youth choirs. They get up there and sing and dance just like the grown-ups do. And it's truly amazing.
There was one mother who came up to where we were. Lynn looks like a grandmother. And she came up and she had her little baby. And Lynn was looking like, what's going to happen now?
Well, I said, oh, baby, because I was excited.
She handed the baby to Lynn.
Before I knew what was happening.
Yeah, she handed the... And the baby just settled, looked up, first looked at her like, who is this? And then, oh, okay. And just settled right into Lynn. You know.
And some of the older girls would actually come up to Lynn and Sue and Catherine and go, what is this? How does, and just touch it. It was strange. Anyway, it's interesting.
Did that happen to you, Ben?
Hair,
I'm kidding.
hair is overrated.
That's right. I wonder if we could chat about what the sense we got from Emmanuel of where he wants to take his diocese. And here is our partners. And it's often so key that we can have confidence in the leader when it's thousands of miles distance. Do you want to share what we saw, John?
The thing I would say about that is a lot of people asked me before we went, are you going to plant trees? Are you going to dig wells? Are you going to build churches? And I was like, no, we're just going over there. And Emmanuel just wanted our presence. That meant the world to him. We didn't have to do any projects or, bring anything. And so what I would encourage everyone here to think about is that you don't have to do anything special if you go on these trips. Just your presence as a goodwill ambassador from All Saints says a ton about how much we care about extending our ministry. And just the gratitude they showed us just for being there was immense. There was never any question we had brought a lot of love and interest and concern, but we didn't have to do anything else. We didn't have to perform anything. That was what struck me about Emmanuel's gratitude, and he made that so clear.
I think one other thing, following on what Judd was saying, that just so moved me is the fact that, after church services or visiting with people, they looked at us as their hope. And that was just so impactful to have somebody look at me and, pray that we had such a relationship that it would go beyond just that visit and that it would extend once we got back here, and that hope and that relationship would evolve into whatever it was, that we all decide is, or what they decide is next and best for all of us. But we are their hope.
I would say we have a real deep love for East Africa, and so because of that, when Emmanuel came the first time, we were asked to have Emmanuel stay with us for a week. I really felt for him because he was here 6 weeks, and he stayed in a different home each week. I thought, oh boy, that's a lot. But we were so fortunate, and Emmanuel came back to visit us a number of times. We spent, more than one visit with him. I really wish I could convey to you, the person he is and the leader he is. It was really such a joy to be with Emmanuel in his home, and he had wanted us to come for so long. And so when this opportunity happened, we thought, we're going, because we've been telling him for years we would come. His leadership is remarkable, and his sense of what is needed, and he's just an incredible spirit. He did share with us some things that are real needs, and you saw the farm, you saw the sewing machines. There's a lot that we can do to help, but they don't look at it like they want a handout. They want a hand up. The farm is a really good example of where that can make a huge difference to them. So we'll have an opportunity, I think, to share some of the things that we could do that are more tangible. But we hope he's planning. We think he's going to come here next summer. That's the plan. So you'll all have a chance to spend some time with him, and I hope you will, because you will have a real experience of someone who truly leads the church in such a special way, and we're just privileged to have him in our lives.
I'm just going to see if there are any questions. We're just coming up to time from the group, to see if there's anything you want to ask this panel. And there will be a chance. Yeah, well, Michelle. And I'll repeat your question if I can. So
I know that we sponsored a number of women to go through seminary, and I'm just kind of wondering if there was any sense of the impact that made people, if you caught anything.
Yeah, well, we saw women leading in worship. We met, as I said, one of the pictures had one of the women who'd just been ordained who will work in social work in Dar es Salaam. It is hard to describe. It's really probably hard for us to know. But I would just invite you to think back, those who remember the Episcopal Church. Some of you remember All Saints before, perhaps you remember All Saints before Barbara Brown Taylor was ordained a priest. Or at least you may have heard of that name. Barbara Brown Taylor, the first Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Atlanta who was a woman. How much that was a paradigm shift for the Episcopal Church. And I was sharing with the staff this week. Last week we had a second Sunday, so I could see, it's the privilege of being up there by the altar. I could see this lovely face, these little girls peering above, like just about seeing over the altar, looking right at Jenny McBride as she celebrates. I cannot say how significant that is to see a woman in leadership. If you're a little girl or a teenager or into womanhood, thinking, is God calling me? When for so long that calling could have been there, but the possibility to live it out wasn't there. Emmanuel has been preparing for this for years, and he now had trained most of the clergy who were ordained in that diocese. And so sometimes we live in a society that is impatient for change to happen tomorrow. And sometimes there is a virtue in allowing change to emerge. And he allowed change to emerge organically by teaching the people of his diocese. And that is how, I think it's a massive impact. And that All Saints has been part of that is so important. I'm going to just wrap us up here with some opportunities. One is that we're going to resurrect, with a little slightly different name, a committee that's been part of All Saints for a long time. Some of you may remember Richard Hall and Barbara Hall, who were instrumental in our global partnerships. So we're going to resurrect our Global Partners Committee, or Global Partnership Committee. We do have a new partnership that will be forming, we hope, in South Africa, and we will make that visit in the new year. And we've had in the works for a while a partnership in Israel, and of course right now partnerships with Israel are, the partnership is potentially there, but it's unsafe, of course, to travel to Israel. It's not advisable to travel to Israel right now. But we've been supporting our partners there in Israel for a while financially. So there'll be opportunity to join that committee. Do you think, you know what, I would like to do that? And maybe you know of somebody, we've got a wonderful parish, people who do have expertise from their working life or their other voluntary commitments that could be a wonderful way for us to learn how to be partners with people across the world. And then the second thing is that we will have a Tanzania, an evening in East Africa here in Ellis Hall. We'll have food and we'll wear our most colorful shirts and maybe we'll even get to dance, who knows. And that will be an opportunity for us to raise some funds, building off the commitments and the vision that the diocese has there, the leadership of Emmanuel, and they've named priorities for us. We didn't want to lead with that too much today because we wanted you to hear how we were, that our time there was relational. And I'll just leave you with this thought. 23 churches across that diocese were visited by 10 Americans. I am an American, just about, American citizen. So 10 Americans came to visit. I can't tell you how, I think it's extremely rare. Sometimes one person or two people will come. Often a bishop might show up with but for 10 of us to come, we had 3 vehicles. We were a convoy, United Nations. It was he mentioned that how significant it was that 10 of us had come, that such a big team, he always called us the team, came over simply to be with them. So those 10 communities, and some of them were far-flung, can now remember the time when the Mzungus came to visit. The Mzungus is the Kiswahili heard for people that look like us. That is worth everything. And our relationship with other churches around the world through the Compass Rose Society, supporting the Anglican Communion, has taught me how important investing in the relationship is, how important showing up is, being proximate to people. It is the game changer to feel like you are one body. So I wonder if you could just join me in thanking and Brooke and Winston Wyman, who couldn't be with us, and Dirk Brown, who couldn't be with us today, just thanking them on your behalf of heading out to Tanzania for us. They're going to make their way safely off the stage here, but they can chat with you, and if you forgive me, I'm going to...
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. I've got to go do something. Yes, that's right.